The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us today on our second session of our capacity building webinar series on communications, stakeholder engagement, and facilitation training under the Oceans 5 project. My name is Lakeisha Anderson. I am the Grand Bahama Parks Manager with the Bahamas National Trust, and today I'm going to be presenting on some examples of stakeholder engagement in the Bahamas. Following my presentation, we'll be joined by Ann Weaver from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, or NOAA, and she'll be giving us a presentation on facilitation today. So before we start, I just wanted to give a brief recap on yesterday's presentation on strategic communications. We started off with Shanique Aubrey-Smith from the Nature Conservancy, who gave us an overview of the Oceans 5 project, and she touched on the stakeholder engagement components that's related to some of the activities within that particular project. And then we had Kristen Mays from the Nature Conservancy's Hawaii program, who shared with us what strategic communications entail. She talked about target audiences and messages, and she gave us some very useful tips on how to develop those particular messages. So at the end of today's presentation, I'll be sharing with you how we'll be getting those links to you so you can review the webinars from yesterday for those who didn't have the opportunity to participate. So stakeholder engagement in the Bahamas. Stakeholder engagement is key for securing implementation, and management. It is an ongoing process that involves the interested parties assessing, planning, and implementation of protected areas. Now, the extent of engagement is dependent upon budgets and timelines, and therefore it's essential that we collaborate with local partner organizations to ensure the continuation of the stakeholder engagement process. Now, as Shanique would have mentioned yesterday, under the Oceans 5 project, there are 4 components of this particular project that would involve engaging stakeholders throughout the 3 years. The first would be planning for new protected areas, so making sure we involve key stakeholders in the identification and advancing of the next 10% of marine protected areas. The management planning work for 2 national parks. We'll be bringing on a number of key stakeholders in the decision-making process on the management prescriptions for those particular areas. And we'll also be looking at providing input, gathering input from communities on all of the national parks, looking at piloting a program with other NGOs throughout the process. So who do we consider our stakeholders? So when we say stakeholders, we mean basically any group or individual with a direct or indirect interest or stake in the resources of a protected area. These stakeholders may include senior policymakers, government agencies, NGOs, local governments, community or local community groups. And they can include fishermen, fishing guides, lodge or hotel owners, dive shops, and even tour operators, just to name a few. Now, yesterday, Kristen mentioned that we want to make sure that we communicate effectively to our stakeholders and our target audiences to build trust and to strengthen relationships, because we do understand that the more buy-in from our key stakeholder groups, the greater sense of ownership, the more successful management implementation of our marine protected areas in the long term. So just to share a few examples of what we've done in the past with regards for establishing or setting up new protected areas and for developing management plans for existing protected areas. Today I'll focus more on examples for stakeholder engagement for community groups or for local communities throughout the country. So question is, through one-on-one interviews, helps to identify our key audiences. It determines the use of a particular area or their practices. It provides their attitudes, it assesses their attitudes towards protection of a particular area, which also gets towards more long-term management of that particular area as well. It can also assess what they currently know or their level of knowledge of that particular area. And the results from such a study can be used to facilitate the development of future communications work and also any outreach plans. And on the slide in front of you, there's a photo of a knowledge, awareness, and practices survey interview in East Grand Bahama. Focus groups are also beneficial. They are generally small, about 15 people, and are composed of individuals who share common attributes with the topic being addressed. The meetings are hosted with a moderator who will ask a prearranged set of questions in an impromptu fashion. So participants have the opportunity to consider the issues and put forward their own point of views without having to come to any kind of general consensus at that time. And the photo here shows a focus group held with bonefish guides for the then proposed Jolta Keys National Park. Field trips are connecting stakeholders with a particular, gives them a first-hand experience to view the values of that particular site, and it also gives them a greater understanding of the local threats and opportunities a protected area can provide for that particular community. Participation in community events are also very helpful and have proven to be successful. They help to build and strengthen relationships with community members while also providing the opportunity and outreach on a particular topic. The photo here, booth provided education on the conservation campaign, but it also provided the BNT an opportunity to provide maps and to provide petitions for persons to support the setup of a new protected area in that particular community as well. Community meetings are probably the most popular types of engagement that we focus on in the Bahamas. They allow community stakeholders to have the opportunity to hear from the project proponents and also for the protected area managers to have an opportunity to have a mutual discussion to determine the most feasible approach without or with minimum conflict. Community meetings must be properly planned, advertised, and executed well. And it should be coordinated, I repeat, it should be coordinated with the island administrator and local government representatives. In most cases, if not applicable, if in all cases, the administrator should be the first point of contact and the chief counselor should be the second, and during any travel, all of those entities we should meet with those persons, have a meeting, and they should actually also be a part of all meetings going forward. A number of other factors should be considered, such as the time of year. You want to make sure that we don't have any conflicts with other events on the island. You want to make target audience would be no hold any meetings during the start of an open season, be it for lobster, be it for grouper. Meeting location is also important. Schools are popular, churches not so much, and the team leader and other groups should be mindful of, should be open, to the change of locations, even if that means having to take your meeting equipment to a local bar or to another space where you could get the attention of other community members. Advertisement notices are also key, and you should also consider using different messages or messenger, to promote the actual dates of your meeting. My worst community meeting in history of my career resulted in the fact that we weren't aware of the local situation. We held a meeting in South Eleuthera. We weren't aware of the contention between some of the local groups, and so our meeting wasn't productive. We didn't achieve our goal, and the biggest thing was we didn't have a good facilitator. And so when you're talking about what makes up a good meeting, you need to make sure it's properly planned, all of the right persons are engaged, are contacted and invited to the meeting, and there is a proper agenda to make sure you achieve that particular goal. So the take-home message here would be It's very important, as Krista would have said yesterday, to know your stakeholders, know who your audience is, understand what's important to them, what makes them tick, what doesn't. It's very important that you partner with local NGOs on the various family islands. In the Ocean 5 project, we have already started to engage with persons on Cat Island, Long Island, and Eleuthera to ensure that they are a part of this particular process. It's very important that we communicate and meet with the island administrator and the chief counselor and the town local government town council, because the island administrator represents the senior government official on the island, and local government represents the community. So they are definitely key target audiences that should be involved throughout the life of the project and the process. Know the local situation. Make sure to find out if there's any contention amongst the groups, and make sure you plan for engaging all of your target audiences. And it's important that you document the entire process. Make sure you have photos, make sure you have a good sign-in sheet, make sure it's filled out, make sure you have contacts with all of the persons that you engaged. And the last point I wanted to make was to make sure that a good facilitator is in place for your meetings, because it's critical for a successful meeting and with managing different personalities and managing controversial topics. So with that, I'm going to wrap that up, and I'll take any questions before we start with the next presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so, and we'll just open up everybody's mic in case you have a question.
Any questions?
At this time, then we could just go on to the next presenter.
So our next presentation will be by Ann Weaver from NOAA on facilitation.
So good morning or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ann Weaver, and I work for the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. And I'm located in coastal Mississippi in our Gulf Coast office. I'm a professional facilitator and have conducted many collaborative processes. And being a facilitator requires that you juggle a lot of different things. You have to juggle the personalities in the room, the agenda, the items that they're discussing, and the times that they are taking to discuss things. And over the years, I've learned a few little tricks and feel as though most anybody can learn how to be a facilitator as long as they follow some of the basic rules. So I'd like to ask all of you, if you can, to log on to our the website that is listed here, because this will be a resource for you going forward that you can use anytime you want to learn, remind yourself of some of these tips, or figure out how to deal with disruptive behaviors when you're in a meeting. So the website is COAST.NOAA.gov/DDB, and the DDB stands for Dealing with Disruptive Behaviors. Once you are on that website, you'll notice in the upper right corner there is a drop-down menu, and you can select different things. Right now I'm going to suggest that you select facilitation skills, and you'll be able to follow my presentation with that website. Okay, so let's move on. When you are planning a meeting, it's really important that to be successful, you figure out who is going to play the different roles in the meeting. So one role is a timekeeper, and it's really, really helpful for the facilitator to have somebody who is helping them keep track of how long different things are supposed to take and how long they're actually taking. Most meetings will have a leader, and the leader is the person who usually has the most authority in the room. So if it's a staff meeting, it's the boss. If it is a community meeting, it's often a city council member or whoever it is that called the meeting. The leader has a lot of stake in the outcome of the meeting. So they care about what is decided, and usually they have an idea of how they would like it to be decided. So sometimes it's not good to have the leader facilitating the meeting. Often you have to have the leader facilitating the meeting just because you don't have a facilitator available. The facilitator is a neutral party who has no stake in the outcome of the meeting, but is helping everybody have the conversations so that they can reach the outcomes together with information from everyone present, including the leader. In addition to the facilitator, it's good to have a recorder. That person can either be the one who is typing up the notes or someone who is at the front of the room with a flip chart or a whiteboard, and they are writing on the board the information that is being generated by the participants. Lastly, on my ladder here, we have the participants. One thing that's really important is to ensure that you have the right participants in the room. If there are going to be decisions made, it's important to have the decision makers in the room and the people who will be affected by the decisions. You'll notice at the top of the slide that I have an eyeball, and that is the observer. This is a partner with the facilitator, and sometimes a facilitator themselves, where they're just trading off roles as the facilitator. This person is watching the body language of the crowd, watching for hands going up, and was really just being an extra set of hands and eyes for the facilitator, making sure the facilitator knows if someone is upset or someone is not happy with what's going on in the meeting. That person is invaluable, helping us know what is happening. So let's talk about some basic facilitation skills. These are really important, and if you can get these 5 skills down, you're well on your way to becoming a good facilitator. The first one is to stay neutral. What this means is you can't agree or disagree with any of the participants while they're having the conversations. You need to listen to everybody and value all the input equally, even if it's a little bit crazy. So if someone says the sky is orange and someone else says the sky is blue, you acknowledge and write down both of those inputs, whether you agree with it or not. The next step is listening actively, and what this means is when the participants are talking about their perspective of the issue, you are really listening to what they're saying. You're not thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to say. You're focused on what they are saying. And your body language will let them know that you're listening. Perhaps you lean forward a little bit. Perhaps you furrow your brow as if you're listening a little bit. But if you are listening actively, your body will portray that to the participants. It also will help you ask good questions to keep them talking. It's important when you ask questions to help the conversation move forward, but not show any biases. So you don't want to ask a question like, are you sure about that? Because that might be leading them to believe that you don't necessarily agree with what they're saying. Instead, you might want to ask, could you clarify that a little bit? So you ask your questions also in a very neutral way. And when you do that, it demonstrates that you're listening actively. So all of these are linked together. The next one is paraphrasing. When you paraphrase, you take what the participant has just told you and you repeat back to the room in your own words what you think you heard. What this does is it helps people in the room hear it in a slightly different way and understand it a little bit better. It also helps the person who is speaking clarify whether or not that's what they really meant. Paraphrasing helps people in the room understand what the participant is sharing in a deeper way. Summarizing is a little bit different in that you are saying back to the person who's been speaking what they have said, hitting their key points. So you're using their words and hitting the key points. Summarizing is a very, very good way to wrap up one section of your agenda and help the group move forward. Moving on to the next agenda. So I'm going to summarize what I just said by showing you the acronym for this, which if you look at the first letter going down the far left-hand column, you'll see that we're saying a good facilitator slaps the participants around. That will help you remember, and that website that I pointed you to will also step you through these 5 facilitation skills. Once you've mastered these 5 facilitation skills and you can slap participants around quite readily, then you can move on to additional facilitation skills. These are ping pong, which is a skill where when a participant asks you a question, you keep in mind that you are not part of the conversation. You're helping them have the conversation. So you ping pong that question to somebody else in the room. That way, you have them talking to each other and you are facilitating that conversation rather than being a participant in the conversation. The next skill listed is called a marina. You may have all heard of a marina or a parking lot. This is a way to capture ideas that come up that you don't have on your agenda. So the marina is a flip chart or a piece of paper in the room that everyone can see, where you write down ideas that come up when someone is taking you a little bit off task by saying to the group, is this something we need to discuss today? This is not part of our agenda, but it sounds like it's something important. Should we capture that on the marina or continue to talk about it now, knowing that we won't finish the items that we've listed on our agenda? And if they all agree that it should go on the marina, then you put it on the marina. I caution you though, don't put ideas you don't like on the marina and never revisit it. They will start to see through that, and they won't trust you, and then they won't let you put anything on the marina. So you have to revisit the marina at the end of meetings to ensure that you have either addressed the issue or have figured out when you will address that issue. Labeling sidetracks is similar to the marina in that when people bring up something that is off topic, you say, this is not something that we have on our agenda. Sometimes, however, if it's a sidetrack that's an intentional sidetrack or something that's completely off topic for this particular audience, they may not opt to put it on the marina. They may just decide that it's a sidetrack. But it's important that you make sure and bring that up. Another thing a facilitator can do is to synthesize information. What synthesizing means is when there is a thread that is running through the conversation that maybe others haven't picked up on. So for example, if someone's talking about habitats and one person is talking about mangrove habitats and they list a lot of reasons why mangrove habitats are important, one of which is a place for adult fish to hunt and hide. And then they're talking about coral reef habitats and all the important functions of a coral reef habitat, including feeding and mating. Or they're talking about seagrass beds where juvenile fish are growing up and all the other things that are important about seagrass beds. A facilitator might synthesize that conversation by saying, we've spoken about several different habitats that are important in the fish life cycle. So that's a synthesis. It wasn't about fish life cycles, but all the habitats related to the fish life cycle. So you could bring that up and synthesize that for them. Synthesis can often have a light bulb go off where they all go, oh, that's how all of this is connected. So it helps them understand the content they're speaking about a little bit better. It's a hard thing to do though, so don't fret if you haven't done that before, or if you don't feel like you're good at that. It takes some practice and it takes really good active listening skills to connect those dots. Another facilitation skill is called hold up a mirror. Holding up a mirror is when you reflect back to the group what you see. So for example, you might say, I see that there's low energy in the room, and I wonder if there are some things we need to do to increase the energy. So let's all stand up and do a jumping jack or something like that. So you reflect to the group what you see, and that way they can be a little self-aware of what they are portraying to you with their body language, and then you can correct it so that you move forward and keep them engaged in the conversation. The last facilitation skill I'm going to talk about is also on that website. If you do the drop-down menu, you will see that there is something called a participant facilitator. That is a participant that is in the audience, so you guys are in the audience, and the facilitator is not doing their job very well. A stealth facilitator is one that can help the facilitator get back on track by doing a few little things. You can ask questions, you can ask them to clarify, you could suggest maybe we break out into small groups to figure this out. You could suggest a break. There's many different things you can do to help move the meeting along when the facilitator gets stuck. And facilitators might really appreciate that. Although you want to be careful, because if the facilitator has a plan, you don't want to mess up their plan. So keep that in mind as well. So now let's talk about planning the meeting. When you're getting ready to plan the meeting, it's really important that you have two different kinds of agendas. The first one is like the sheet music when you're going to go to an orchestra. It has a lot of detail about what each individual person involved is going to be doing. So each of the people playing in the orchestra will have their own sheet music, and they know what they are supposed to do because the sheet music tells them what they're supposed to do. And the facilitator is like the conductor who's letting the audience know when they're supposed to do things and helping keep them on track. The other agenda would be the participant agenda. And the participant agenda doesn't have that kind of detail. It's more like the program when you go to the orchestra. So it will just have the times we're going to do certain things, when we're going to have breaks, what we're going to be discussing at the meeting, and some objectives of the meeting. So those are the two kinds of agendas. One with lots of detail for the facilitator and the presenters. One for the participants that helps them see when we're going to do what and what we'll be discussing. So there are different things that go into the process agenda from the content agenda. So the content agenda is what the participants will have. That agenda has in it why we are meeting. The other agenda is we call the process agenda because it's going to list out the details of how we are going to do it. So ground rules are part of how we are going to do the meeting. The topic for discussion, however, is why we are meeting. We are meeting to discuss this particular topic. When we establish methods and procedures for the group to follow during the discussions, those are the how we do it. The facilitator will also be managing the group dynamics by perhaps breaking them into small groups or moving them around. Making decisions might be why we meet. Maybe we're meeting because we need to make a decision. We also need to decide how we're going to make that decision. So making a decision is actually both the why and the how. Maintaining relationships is part of the how. The facilitator will think through in advance where they want to have the participants sitting, who we're going to partner them with, how they are going to interact with each other. The facilitator may also use some tools and some materials. So those are things we use when we are thinking about how we are going to do it. Maybe we'll have them use some kind of grid to list the actions that they want to do. That might be a tool. The next item on my how versus why is addressing agenda items. So we have an agenda and we're going to go down through the agenda, and that is probably why we're meeting. Solving problems, we are also going to be doing that during the meeting. But selecting where the meeting is going to be, setting the temperature in the room, or the climate for how we're going to work together, that's all part of the why. So I hope this gives you a good understanding of the difference between what goes in the participant agenda, which is the agenda why we're meeting, and what would go into the process agenda, which is how we're going to do it. So I want to talk just a little bit more about a process agenda. When you're planning your meeting, before you get ready to meet, it's really important that you develop your objectives with the planning team to ensure that you are on the same page with the planning team for what you want to accomplish during the meeting. So the very first thing you do is you develop your objectives. Once you have a good set of objectives, those will be different sections of your agenda. So you can see on the process agenda template that I have showing, there's many different sections to this. Only 1.5 is showing, but they can have up to like 25 sections. It just depends how many objectives you have. So you'll put the objective into the section, and the first objective is often a welcome and introductions and giving the participants an overview of what we will be trying to accomplish. Once you have all your objectives filled into their individual boxes, then you can start to develop the activities you will do to reach that objective. So if my first one is welcome and introductions, then my activity might be do a round robin, have each person tell us why they're here and what they hope to get out of the meeting. So I would capture that in this box. I would write down the objective, which is people will know who's in the room. I would write down any presentations that I want to occur. Then I would write down my activities. So in my welcome, maybe the round robin and what I'm going to ask them. Then I write down who's going to present, so who's leading that session. And lastly, I'll write down how much time I think that will take. So each section will have the total time written in the bottom right-hand corner of the box, and in the far left-hand column, it will have what time we expect that part of the agenda to start. And right below that time, we will have who is going to lead that. And lastly, in the far right column, we will have how we want to set it up and what materials we need for that section. So if we need Post-it notes, we'll write that down in here, or a flip charts, we'll write that. Markers, we'll write that. So that when we go to pack up for the meeting, everything we need is listed in that right-hand column, and we can use that as a checklist to make sure that we have everything we need. So that is a process agenda. These are really, really important for the facilitator so that when they get up in front of the room, they know exactly what they need to be doing and at what time they will be doing it. Lastly, I wanted to talk just for a minute about what motivates people in meetings and how some of those motivations can appear to be disruptive. Many times when someone is being disruptive in a meeting, they don't mean to be disruptive. They are just passionate about what they're talking about, or they're emotional, and it can sometimes disrupt the meeting. So on my compass of motivating factors, we have the normal people in the middle. We have passive people on one side and aggressive people on the other side. And we have people who are interested in finishing the task at hand, so they're very task focused. And then we have people who are it's really important to them that the people in the room are very happy and productive. So what can happen is the task-focused aggressive person just wants to get it done. So if you're doing a round-robin introductions around the room, they might be feeling as though it's going too slowly and they get antsy. And so they might start raising their hand and saying, can we move on? Can we move on? And it comes up as kind of disruptive. So one thing a facilitator can do in advance is let them know, I've got plenty of time on the agenda for everyone to get an opportunity to speak, and I'm going to go around the room first to get introductions, but don't worry, by the end of the meeting we will accomplish this objective. And then that task-focused person can relax a little bit and not be quite so worried about finishing the task at hand. Additionally, I might have some people-focused aggressive people, and what they really want is to make sure that everyone gets appreciated, that everyone gets an opportunity to share their information, and so they might try to slow the process down a little bit if they think you might not ask them questions. So what the facilitator can do in advance here is, again, let them know, I will go all the way around and everybody will get a chance, but first I want to hear from this person or whatever it is. Passive people don't often come across as disruptive, but if they have pertinent information that you really need, they can be disruptive to the meeting. So the people-focused passive people, they get really uptight when people have differing opinions. So it's important for the facilitator to let them know that you will manage those conversations. You will not let it get personal, but it's important that they understand that we have those conversations. That's the only way we can really make progress. Then we have the passive task-focused people, and those people really want to get it right. They want it to be perfect. So ensure that they understand what our objective for the meeting is, so that they're not trying to get ahead of the game and rush people through the process. If you make sure that all of those personalities understand what the plan is for the day, sometimes they won't get as disruptive as they might otherwise get. But if they do get disruptive, we do have an intervention process that will help you control those disruptions and not let them take over the meeting. So you might recall the process, the facilitation skill called hold up the mirror. If you have a disruptive person in the room who keeps raising their hand or speaking over somebody else or trying to talk out of turn, you might say something to them like, I see you have a lot of information you'd like to share with the group. So that is my mirror statement. I can see that you have a lot of information you'd like to share with the group. Then I need to describe their impact on the group. So the impact is probably that others are not getting their turn to speak. So you would say, I want to make sure that I hear from everybody, so I'm doing a little round robin. Please state one idea and I'll come back to you when I can. So that's the impact. I need to make sure and hear from everyone in the room. And then you just redirect the behavior and say, Janie, I'd like to hear from you now. So you just shift the focus away from that person once they know that you will come back to them at some point. And that should help keep the disruption to a minimum. It's not an easy thing to do. Sometimes people get their feelings a little bit hurt But remember, the facilitator's goal is to make sure everyone in the room gets a chance to participate. So if one person gets their feelings a little hurt or they get a little upset, don't worry so much about that one person. They will come back around when you get to their turn. And be loyal to everyone else in the room who you've already promised that you are going to manage all the disruptive behaviors. So in case you can't come up with ways to do this just off the top of your head, you'll notice on that website that I gave you at the beginning of the meeting that each of these characters is listed on the website. And all you have to do is click on one of them and you'll see that it comes up with a description of that character, and then it gives you things that you can say. So I clicked on the jellyfish, and it has a gentle intervention, which has the mirror statement, which is, jellyfish, that's an interesting perspective. Now don't call them a jellyfish, that wouldn't be good. Instead, call them by their name. We all respond to our name. It makes us feel listened to when someone calls our name, and it makes us feel like they've acknowledged us. So you would say jellyfish or Jane. That's a really interesting perspective. So that's your mirror statement. If you have a concern about the proposed solution, blah, blah, blah. So this gives you the step-by-step way to go through this, this intervention strategy. So I'm going to wrap up now and say I appreciate all of you listening in. And if you have any questions, I think we have a few minutes for questions. I wish you all happy meetings.
And we'll just open up everybody's mic. Akeisha, you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Can I get the website again for Ann Viva?
Okay, Anne, you want to go ahead and give that?
So it should be showing right now for those who can see it. For those who cannot see it, it's COAST, COAST.NOAA, NOAA.gov/DDB, dealing with disruptive behaviors, so DDB.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Anne?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, if you have a very limited budget, and I'm talking about the fact that we have to travel to various islands to conduct meetings. So if you only have 3 persons as part of your planning team, what roles are the most important? I'm wondering, well, I would imagine you can kind of double up some of the roles, but if you have 3 persons, how would you identify who would be, there you go, who would conduct the various meeting roles?
So I like for my observer to also be the timekeeper, and that way you can have somebody else be the recorder. The leader is probably going to be one of your stakeholders, so one of you could facilitate, one of you could timekeep and observe, and one of you could be writing down on the flip chart. Additionally, I often will do my own flip chart writing. It's a way to control the pace and demonstrate that I'm listening actively, but it takes a little bit of practice to facilitate and write at the same time.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Anne?
Yeah, we have one.
You
Hello?
have a question? Yes?
Hi, this is Alexio here.
Hi.
I have a question. So what do you do in cases where you have the audience who you're facilitating, they're really, I guess they're really emotionally heightened, like they're arguing and you can't really get to see them, get them to calm down.
So I try not to have them in that situation, but if they're already that way when they get to the meeting, I design my process so that there is not a lot of large group conversations. So there are different tools that you can use, but one that comes to mind is you could have flip charts posted around the room that ask certain questions that you need answered. And so at the very beginning, I would tell them that I'd like for them all to go to each flip chart and write down the answer to the question that they think would best solve whatever the issue is, and then let them rotate around the room writing on all the flip charts. What that does is it helps them feel like you've heard them because it's right there in writing, and it also keeps them from just saying really emotional things, but thinking about the questions and actually really answering them. Does that help?
And that helps a lot.
Okay.
If there are no other questions for Anne, I would like to say thank you very much. It was a very insightful presentation. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Anne. And so in wrapping up today's webinar session, we will be, both sessions were recorded. We'll be providing you links to both of the sessions via a YouTube link, but we'll also be posting them to the Bahamas National Trust YouTube channel. So if you are able to, you can subscribe. We'll have them available there, but we'll also share the links to you via email. Kristen also sent some additional resources based on the presentation yesterday, so we'll also be sharing that with you as well via email. And in terms of follow-up, we'll be reaching out to a lot of you on this call, on this presentation session today. Those of you in Cat Island, Eleuthera. I don't think we have anyone from the Berry Islands, but also in Long Island. We'll be conducting meetings after the referendum, so we'll be working along with yourselves and planning for stakeholder meetings on your respective islands to help identify areas on your particular island to be designated within the next 10%. So we look forward to working with you all, and we just want to say thank you again for joining us for the past 2 days. We'll be doing a follow-up in-person training later on in the year, so we'll be sending you emails and communicating with you on that as well in the near future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very educational.